Ah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. This is our session where we're going to talk about family support for student success. We're hopefully going to address any questions, concerns you have. But I'm Dr. Diana Ward. I'm the Chief Student Conduct Officer and the Title IX Coordinator here at Loyola. And I'm going to let my colleague introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Liz Rainey and I'm the Executive Director of the Pan American Life Student Success Center. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm going to give us an overview of what you can expect from us. We have about an hour slated for this webinar, and we've recruited some wonderful colleagues, including Dr. Dale O'Neill and Dr. Paul Bueller, who will be in the chat answering some of your questions that may come up. Know that Diana, when she's in presentation mode, can get to your questions at the end of our discussion, but they will monitor questions and cue us in to a larger audience. So thank you for joining us. But in a nutshell, what you can expect from this conversation is to walk away with some tools and some ways to feel empowered to support your student to be successful this fall, namely knowing boundaries and guidelines and encouraging communication and connections. And we want to give you some tools to support goal setting and scheduling time, which is a common challenge for all new students, and especially in the new ways in which folks learn. And we do want to encourage you to promote honesty and seeking resources. And within this presentation, you'll see some student feedback, and that's actually from data that I gathered this spring from second semester freshmen. So it's really current and relevant to this conversation. So let me begin with a point of pride, and I know many of these faces, so I always smile when I see this slide, that your students are coming to a wonderfully diverse and welcoming and inclusive environment, and that is a point of pride. Our students come from different backgrounds, with different experiences in terms of college, different locations, and different socioeconomic backgrounds. In addition, we have a new layer of diversity, and that's the modalities in which folks will be learning this fall. So I do want to give some attention to the definitions of the ways in which students will be learning. And this is in response to many of the questions that we've seen from parents through Facebook and other channels. So again, if you have questions about this, put them in chat and Dr. Paul can address them. So if your student, or if you hear of students who are attending classes virtually, that means that their entire class schedule will be happening remote like this. There are two different kinds of online classes. And again, in higher ed, we tend to use language that makes sense to us, but it may not be familiar. So just to define that, people will say, oh, is it synchronous or asynchronous? A synchronous class would be like this, like we would gather at the same time and meet by Zoom through remote channels. An asynchronous class would be self-paced, more or less, that a student would access Canvas as our learning management platform and read through tools and videos and complete the coursework in the time that they set aside. The new modality that you may have heard about that's not unique to Loyola, that many institutions have put into place, is called hybrid, and that's a flexible learning style where we have limited the number of students who would be physically together based on the classroom size. So know that physical plants walked around our beautiful campus and took all of our floor plans and drew a circle per person and a circle around it to give us 6 feet apart to give us precisely how many students can be in that space at any one time. For example, in my space, we have a classroom downstairs that I know can hold no more than 7 individuals. And so those will be posted. But what does this mean for classes? What this means is, what's interesting about Loyola is we don't have many huge auditoriums. We don't have classrooms of 300 students. It's a point of pride. But it does mean that we have these smaller classrooms that might hold 24. So let's suppose I teach intro psychology this fall, and I have 24 students enrolled, and they've all opted to be hybrid. 12 of them in the class meet Tuesday and Thursday. 12 of them may attend in person on Thursday, while the other 12 attend virtually Tuesday. And then they flip-flop that Thursday. So everyone's attending class together. Just one day a week, they're physically going to the classroom with their masks at safe distance. and the other day of the week, it might look like this. That requires technology that, thanks to the generous donors and to a lot of commitment from Loyola, we have outfitted classrooms to be able to do. There are a few classes that are completely what we would say on the ground. I don't know if there's a better term for it. They largely include things like a lab science. They're just very difficult to facilitate through online modules. So some students have a combination of these classes. Some students are completely virtual. If you have questions about what your student's schedule looks like, that would be a good discussion point to put in the chat, and Paul can follow up with you individually.
So
let me turn it back to Diana. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, one of the questions that we frequently get from parents is, what should I be helping my student with, and what should I start to transition and have them kind of own? And so we've created this slide to kind of show the continuum of where you might want to be giving a lot more support to your student, and where you might want to relinquish some of that control and let them start to take the lead on these things. So in terms of what your student is likely to still need help with, doctor's appointments, insurance, prescriptions, especially in the time of COVID-19, they may need some help navigating that, especially if they're not local. We do have student health services. Student health services is located in the Dana Student Center. It is directly below the Orleans room, which is our dining hall. And this is essentially like an urgent care. So the only thing that'll be a little bit different this year is that we are asking students, instead of dropping in for appointments, we ask that they call ahead. We're trying to limit the chance that they get exposed to anyone who may have COVID-19. So we are asking that they call ahead, but it is still like an urgent care. We do have several different prescription services, one that delivers on campus, and then you'll find have a Walgreens within walking distance as well. You can find more information about all of these things on the Student Health Services website, and I encourage you to take a look. Things that we want you to kind of transition and start teaching your student how to do. One of them would be how to fill out FAFSA. So the next time you sit down to fill out FAFSA, I ask that you have your student sit with you and you kind of show them and you walk them through the process of how they do this. And our goal is that by the time they graduate, and they may be thinking about going on to graduate school, going to law school, going to med school, whatever it may be, that they feel confident in being able to do that themselves. Similarly, talking through budget planning. And we're not just talking about, kind of their entertainment expenses or whatever money they might be bringing to school, also thinking about things like wolf bucks. So a lot of students love eating in our dining room, but then we have students who prefer what we call our retail options. They'd rather have Subway or go over to Tulane and get Panera Bread. And our wolf bucks work both at Loyola and at Tulane. But some students find that they've used all of their wolf bucks up early in the semester. And when it gets to be late in the semester, they don't have any wolf bucks left. And so all they can do is go to the dining hall. So sitting down with your child and talking through how many wolf bucks they have, how many they can spend a week, so they make sure that they don't run out. Now you can of course add money at any time, but if you're wanting your student to work on a budget, this can be a good way for them to start that budget planning. And then of course, helping them to learn how to do laundry before they come. We don't want to have any student come with this beautiful wardrobe and put it in the laundry for the first time and it come out itty bitty little teeny tiny. So making sure that they know how to do laundry before they get to campus if they're going to be a residential student. And then in terms of things that we'd like your student to take the lead on, one of them would be any kind of roommate conflicts. So one of the things that we're going to have students do when they first move to campus, if they're a residential student, is they're going to actually sit down with their roommate and they're going to create a roommate agreement or a roommate contract. And that's where they're going to talk through things like what time do we want lights off, what temperature do we want the room to be, all of that good stuff. They'll also talk about a cleaning schedule. And, as the case can be when you live with someone, sometimes conflicts arise. And so we want to work with students to start having those conversations directly. So they'll get some training on that in Wolfpack Welcome. They'll get more information on that when they meet with their resident advisors. And then if they're ever having an issue, we have our resident advisors there as a first step to help mediate any conflicts. And then if that's not working, we do have community directors who are full-time professional staff members who live in each of our residence halls, and they are always available to help students with a roommate conflict. Of course, if at any time you feel that the situation is unsafe or your student feels the situation is unsafe, we want them to let residential life know, or LUPD, or my office in conduct know right away, and we'll intervene. We also want to encourage students to take the lead on talking to faculty and advisors. We have really wonderful professors at Loyola, and one of the beauties of Loyola is that we're a smaller school, and so our professors really and truly do want to talk to your student. So please encourage them to use office hours, encourage them to email or call their professor if there's something they don't understand or if they need help with something. Our professors are really, really responsive, and they really do want to hear from students. They're always happy to talk through grades to make sure that students understand what percent of the test is going to impact the grade, how many assignments they have left, things like that. And of course, we always encourage our students, especially our freshmen, to explore majors. We do allow students to take exploratory classes, and we know that it's really common for students to switch majors or to not know what they want to major in yet. So we want to help them to find what they're truly passionate about. And then conduct cases would be the other one. If it's ever an issue that involves drugs or alcohol, we will inform you right away as parents, but all other conduct issues are protected by FERPA unless your student chooses to sign a waiver, which I'll talk about in a little bit when we get to the slide where we're going to talk about Loyola's online record system. But what I want to promise you is that if your son or daughter ever comes to my office, they're going to be treated with respect, with kindness, with compassion. We infuse our process with a lot of love. Our process is really restorative. But we do always welcome parents into that process, but ultimately we allow that choice to be up to the student. Now, I did want to share some of our new guidelines that are related to COVID-19, as I'm sure that's on your mind. So these are guidelines that we have shared with students and that we will be going over extensively in Wolfpack Welcome. So we are going to be mandating that students maintain 6 feet of distance, whether they're in a classroom or they're outside, unless they're in their personal residence hall. When they're in their personal residence hall, we want students to still try to maintain that 6 feet of distance, but we know that that may get difficult in individual residence hall rooms or in the bathroom. So they can always wear a mask if they ever feel uncomfortable. They will be mandated to wear masks when they're outside though, and then when they're in classrooms or anywhere else inside that's not their personal residence hall. In order to limit this chance that we get COVID-19 on campus or that it spreads, we are going to limit guests. So we will not allow any outside guests onto campus this year. We will allow students to have guests from their residence hall. So for example, if your student lives on the second floor, they can have somebody else from the second floor come into their room, but we aren't going to allow them to have visitors from other residence halls, from the hotel we're partnering with, or from outside. As Liz mentioned, we are limiting the number of people that can be in any room. All of our rooms have been measured so that we will only be allowing the number of people in the room that can maintain 6 feet of distance. There'll be signs all over campus so students will know exactly how many people can be in the room or can be in the elevator. And then we just ask that once they're in the room that they do wear those masks, that they do maintain that 6 feet of distance. And we'll have cleaning supplies available as well if they want to wipe down their area before and after they use it. Administrative instruction simply means that we are asking all students to follow the instructions of the university related to our COVID-19 guidelines, but also to be mindful of any city restrictions. The university's restrictions will always align with the city, and if there's any changes, we will announce that to the whole student body. The conduct unbecoming policy is essentially meant to make sure that no student who may test positive for COVID-19 gets bullied or ostracized for that. We want to make sure that students are being supportive of each other and that nobody's being made to feel bad for potentially contracting the disease. Room conditions is simply saying that we're asking students to please make sure that they keep their room clean. We will have our WFF workers cleaning our communal bathrooms, but some students will have individual bathrooms, and we will ask that they clean those. And then of course, their own personal room, we are gonna ask that they clean those as well. Isolation quarantine simply means that if a student does test positive for COVID-19 or they become exposed to someone who has COVID-19, that we're going to have a quarantine for, and then we'll have a separate isolation floor as well. The student, we're going to ask that they call Student Health Services. Student Health Services will give them exact directions on where they may need to move. They'll also talk through how we're going to deliver food, how we'll deal with laundry, all of those things. But we do ask that students don't go to class, don't go to work, anything like that if they test positive or become exposed to COVID-19, and that they let the university know right away. But again, we're going to go over all of this with your student in Wolfpack Welcome, and then we'll have signs up all over campus to remind them. Of course, we're going to require a face mask, and your student will be getting a really cool Loyola branded face mask when they get to campus. But we do encourage them to go ahead and pack about a week's worth so that they don't have to do laundry every day. Our student organizations are still going to be up and running. We are going to be asking that they do most events virtually. If students would like to have an event with more than 10 people, we're going to have trained wellness monitors who will go to those events to help make sure that students wear face masks, that they maintain 6 feet of distance, so that our students can still get some of these social aspects that they would normally have, but we're doing it in the safest way possible. And then we've also added some additional guidelines to our student demonstration policy, mainly being that we want to encourage students, as always, to voice their opinion, to be engaged, but we want them to wear masks and we want them to stay socially distanced. And we're asking that they not do any demonstrations inside this year, just because it increases the risk of spreading COVID-19. And then you'll see here that we've got some additional things. These are not things that we would be punitively sanctioning if a student wasn't doing them, but we're going to be doing educational campaigns. We're really going to be encouraging every student to regularly wash their hands. We'll have sanitized stations all over campus that students can also use. We're going to encourage every student to do a temperature check and require that they do what we call a daily symptom assessment. So students will get information about how to download an app called Campus Clear, and that app is going to walk them through that daily symptom assessment. We ask that they avoid touching. So I know that everybody's going to be excited when we get on campus, and we are generally a very loving campus that likes to hug, likes to high five, but in the time of COVID, we are going to try to avoid doing that. We're also going to try to avoid sharing. We know that some students may be in need of things. And so if your child is in need of anything, whether it be school supplies, a laptop, Wi-Fi, anything like that, we ask that you let the university know. We have something called the Behavioral Intervention Team, short, we call it BIT, B-I-T, and anybody can report any issue of concern to BIT. So we have a reporting form. And we often get reports from parents, professors, or other students that a student is in need of something. And so if you submit that report on your student, you just let us know what they need, and we're going to work with them to make sure that we get it, so that we can make sure that they can access their education and they can have a good experience while they're here at Loyola. We are not going to require gloves unless your child is in a specific maybe lab or if their internship requires it. But in general, gloves won't be required. Instead, we're really going to stress that students wash their hands and practice other personal hygiene. We are asking that students restrict their own travel. Same with faculty and staff. This is why we're going to end in-person classes at Thanksgiving break, and then students will take their finals online. So we're asking if students can to try not to travel until we get to that November break. So if a student does need to travel, we are asking that they call Student Health Services, and Student Health Services will advise them if they need to quarantine. Generally, students would only need to quarantine for 14 days if they are traveling to or from a hotspot. But again, we'll go over all of this in Wolfpack Welcome, and we'll have that student health number all over campus so students will know exactly what to do. And then last but not least, you can actually see that student health number there. I would encourage you to put that in your phone, and I would encourage you to have your child put that in their phone. I always tell students it's better to have a number like this and not need it than need it and not have it. So again, we will ask them to call Student Health Services right away if they test positive for COVID-19, experiences any symptoms of COVID-19, or become exposed to someone with COVID-19. Do know we will be doing contact tracing on campus, and your child will be contacted if we believe they've become exposed to someone with COVID-19. And then they would get further information on what to do from there from Student Health Services. This is Loyola's online record access system, or LoRa as we call it. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is where you can actually go, and your student can go, and you can, or your student, I should say, your student can go and sign a FERPA waiver. The FERPA waiver, once signed, would allow you to be able to see their grades. It would also allow you to see any early warnings. Early warnings typically are submitted by professors, and they suggest that the student is struggling academically, or maybe they're not coming to class, but it's a flag for us to check in and to help that student get back on track. So again, if your child signs a FERPA waiver in LoRa, then you would be able to see this information. If you can't find the link, you can always reach out to me. I can always send you a PDF, and you can do a hard copy signature of it. And then I'm going to pass it back over to Liz to talk a little bit more about LoRa.
Hi, everyone. And Dr. Paul just put the link in the chat box for you to access this portal. Again, this mirrors the student portal, so you can find your student schedule, You can find, again, information like early warning, midterm, and final grades. But again, your student will need to have given you FERPA permission to access this portal. So this, again, goes back to the theme of communication, that if you have an expectation that you see your students' grades, then this is a very good time to have that conversation, that if you are supporting your student, to come to Loyola, that if you have academic expectations and expect to see their grades, then they need to give you this permission. And again, I think that's just really important, because if you do see something of concern, the first thing you should be able to do is to talk to your student about it. But we also want to empower you with some of the tools that you can refer and support your student to access. So let me reiterate, certainly Diana and I have been working with college students for many years, and the keys to success, independent of the modality and what's going on in the world, really do boil down to attendance and engagement, like going to your classes, being attentive, paying attention, building connections with the community in the ways in which you have access, and finding a way to balance and schedule your time so that you can both excel academically and personally, spiritually, and all of your other goals for that wholehearted experience that we pride ourselves in at Loyola. That's one of the reasons why we have early warning. We launched that program every semester about 3 weeks in, so that we can pick up on a student who might be missing class and just might need a nudge in the right direction. Similarly, we create lots of opportunities for folks to connect with each other. We are acutely aware that the ways in which we used to connect with big events and big things on the lawn, we all need to figure out different ways to safely communicate with each other. But of all the things, I actually have a lot of faith and optimism with what 18-year-olds can figure out and how to connect with each other through different platforms. And if your student has relied on you to schedule their time, I mean, imagine most students in high school had a pretty rigorous schedule. What's interesting is your students, I'm going to assume, have been in online classes since March, like the rest of the country. So they may have already adapted ways to figure out how to navigate this space. But what works for them? Do they do best at night? Should they wake up early? But there is some building routine that students really do need support around when they first make that transition, based on my experience. So going back to some of our suggestions, and I know we've reiterated this, and again, these bullets are direct quotes from students who agreed to participate in a research study, and these were on discussion boards. Again, students are going to talk about something called Canvas, where they access their syllabi, they might find all their readings, and they may post to discussion boards. This is a very common technique. But the prompt for this particular class was to go talk to your professor during office hours, and there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of who are these people? They seem to know a lot about history, why, a lot of mystique. And that's true of students whose families have been going to college for generations and those who have not. But we do try to demystify that and assure individuals, our students, that our professors are there to support them. And sometimes they just need to get over that first hurdle, to actually go see them, to actually knock on the door, or to schedule a Zoom, or to respond to outreach. Because again, what I pick up from here is that these students were very open in expressing how nervous they were, but then the strong feeling of relief and excitement. And this goes back to decades of literature about persistence and success in higher ed, that building community and integrating in the academics of your institution, as well as building a sense of belonging, are key to seeing your students succeed through graduation.
There's a lot of other ways to connect with Loyola as well. And we want to encourage students to do these things. They may look a little different this year. Some of them may be virtual, but we are going to have a lot of opportunities for students to engage virtually, and we're going to have some in person as well. One of the things that students can do is consider outside of class connections around shared interest. We've got peer tutors in our Office of Writing and Learning Services, we call it OWLS, that are trained to meet with students virtually. And we've got a bunch of other wonderful tutors in other subjects. So this can be a great way for students to connect with upperclassmen and do things that are going to help their academics. We also encourage our students to join a student organization. We've got more than 100. Students can take a look at what we've got on Student Life and Ministries page. We always say that there's no reason for students to be bored on campus because we've got so many student organizations, and because we have so many student organizations, there's something going on campus almost every single night of the week that's completely free and open to students. If your student goes to Student Life and Ministry and doesn't see an organization that particularly strikes their interest, they can always start a club. They just need a few other students and write a constitution, and we'll get them, we'll help them to get that organization approved and going. A few years ago, we had some students who really wanted to start a DJ club. They got a couple of students together, wrote a constitution, got it approved, and now we have an active DJ club on campus. So we've got a little bit of something for pretty much everyone. If you like Dungeons and Dragons, we've got a Dungeons and Dragons group. You know, if you're more into athletics, we've got plenty of intramurals that students will be able to join. So definitely encourage your student to take a look at that. We've also got a lot of different things that we can do to help students deepen their faith through spiritual offerings. I was just exchanging emails with Laura Alexander, who leads our Christian Life communities. Our CLCs are small groups that meet weekly, and they discuss different aspects of faith. So they may read some Bible passages and kind of reflect on what it means, or they might have a larger philosophical discussion that isn't necessarily completely based in religion. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be training those CLC leaders how to be wellness monitors so that they can make sure that those groups are practicing those social distancing guidelines, wearing masks, and that they feel comfortable with those guidelines. So this will be a way that we can still make sure that students are able to meet in person for some things. Likely a lot of this will happen outside. For those of you that haven't been to our campus, we've got beautiful quad spaces and we have tons of outdoor seating. We've actually increased our outdoor seating so that we can encourage students to socially distance, to be socially distanced and outside, but to still be able to be together. And then we always want to encourage our students to engage in our leadership programs. One of the beauties of being at a small school is that students don't have to wait until they're juniors or seniors to take a leadership position. They can join an organization as a freshman, and by their second semester or by their sophomore year, they can be running for leadership positions. So for example, in my office, we run the Student Justice Board and the Board of Appeals. If your student joins as a freshman, they are eligible to be the president or be the chair of the board by the time they're a sophomore. So if you think that's something your student would be interested in, especially if they're thinking about going into law, would love to have them email me. We'll be doing trainings in the first couple weeks of school, and then we'll start our Student Justice Board and Board of Appeal hearings not long after that. As I said, we're going to have a mix of in-person and virtual activities, so students still won't be bored. It might look a little different than in years past, but I promise you we're going to have tons of great programs that we're going to offer to students. And then we always have tons of volunteer opportunities, and many of these opportunities can also be done virtually. For example, we've got an opportunity right now where students can actually make phone calls to folks in nursing homes. And so it's a wonderful way to volunteer, but to still keep themselves safe. So again, we'll have a mix of in-person and virtual options for that as well. And with that, I'll kick it back over to Liz.
Thanks. So one of the highlights we emphasized in the beginning is around goal setting and scheduling. And I just want to highlight that this is a strength of the Student Success Center. And myself, I'm one of the trained success coaches. So many of us have been trained in success coaching, and that toggles between folks who have specialty areas in advising, also our career coaches. We're all tasked and able to work with students to assess routine, figure out barriers, figure out strengths, set rewards, or whatever structures work for them. But this is a place where I think parents and family members can really be accountability partners. When I talk to students who have sort of gotten a little confused or jumbled, or they just missed assignments, they didn't realize it was on the syllabus, the professor didn't make an announcement. And when I unpack, what systems worked for them previously, many times it was you. You were there maybe nightly, reminding them of their homework. And, in the beginning, I would consider, maybe Sunday night, you just say, hey, Paul, let's just run through your week. What do you have going on? When can I check in with you? And then, maybe Wednesday night you are sending a text message like, hey, how's the paper going? Did you make it to a tutor? I think this is where parents can be really supportive and a really place for mature conversation. Like, hey, how can I be your partner? I don't want to be your nag. I am your mom, but I do want to be a partner to you and your success. And I think that can be very powerful. And again, if your student has not yet, I know about 1/4 to 1/3 of the class has already connected with their advisor coach. But if your student has not yet, they have a coach advisor. That person is part of Dr. Paul's team. Encourage them to have a conversation, even if they don't feel like they have any questions, even if they're like, I got it. We'd love to get to know them, especially before the week of move-in and all the excitement. We can talk to students about their goals, what they hope to achieve in their first year or semester at Loyola. And the more we build these proactive relationships, the stronger our reaction could be when things might need some tweaking. So again, I do emphasize that if your student, I would leave this conversation and say, hey, Paul, have you talked to your coach advisor? And if the answer to that is no, they should check their email, or you should follow up with Dr. Paul to find out who that person is. We meet with students by Zoom, by text message, by phone, and all the different modalities this summer. So let's talk through a scenario, because I do like to kind of be action-oriented to something that, may happen. And, hopefully this doesn't, but like real talk. There are some times where students don't get the grade that they think. So suppose it's October and you have FERPA permission, you figured out Laura, your student, Diana, is telling you everything's awesome, I love it here, I'm figuring this out, I'm rocking out in my mask, like everything's going great. But you go into Laura and the grades speak otherwise. You see some low midterm grades and you have like a freak out, and I can attest, I am also a parent, like, oh my gosh. So the first thing I would recommend doing is to call Diana and just say, Diana, have you seen your grades? I'm worried. Because sometimes parents call us first and we'll usually say, have you talked to your student? Because again, this is a place where you and I can talk a lot, but at the end of the day, Diana is going to that class, is building that relationship with the professor, and she's the one who actually needs to do the work. So we can talk and brainstorm, but it's best to include the student pretty soon. Then it's just a matter of like understanding the grades. Like, are these grades a result of a missing assignment that you may have missed, or missing class? Is there an opportunity to rewrite a paper? Like, I would say almost every professor in the Department of English, they have autonomy, but almost every English professor I know would give a student an opportunity to rewrite a paper after going to see a tutor, because many of us in academia write and rewrite and edit papers forever. It's a learning opportunity. But then this is a place where our coaching methodology is important. We usually coach a student to say, let's talk to your professor. Like, let's understand what's behind this low grade. Are you paying attention? Is your note-taking strategy effective? I can tell you, I'm a doctoral student myself, and it was new for me to have classes in Zoom. And for the first time, I started taking handwritten notes. And that's because I just decided that like I couldn't I have actually 3 screens at home, don't ask. But I had to engage a different part of my brain. Whereas when I attend a class in person, I used to take them on my computer. So again, students need to figure out, are you getting everything out of the class that you need? And again, this is a place where those of us in student success can brainstorm, but we'll often encourage a student to talk to their professor, because the professor submitted a grade with the hope that the student would say, hey, okay, I'm not okay with that. How do I improve? And that's something that we can brainstorm around, but a useful exercise to talk about all of the different parts that we brought together in this conversation. So let me highlight again the services that you can expect. I know that Dr. Paul put our link in the chat. So again, please bookmark us. We spent a lot of time making sure our content is really up to date, and we have these 5 wonderfully overlapping integrated services for students. That includes Dr. Paul's shop, which is academic advising and success coaching. That's where first-year students will connect with their advisor coach around course scheduling, personal goal setting and planning, and building relationships. That really becomes your first point of contact. Our Career Development Center also talks to first-year students. They might help students navigate things from internships, work study, just navigating how does my academic life connect to a long-term goal. And we start that young. That is not something that students do senior year. We encourage students right away to think long-term about their career goals, and they work closely with Dr. Paul's team. Again, earlier Diana referenced owls. We found they have like little owls everywhere, and that's our peer-led writing and learning services. We employ more than 40 peer tutors to support students in subject areas ranging from writing, statistics, psychology, foreign languages, business. We even had a retired business professor who would tutor for us in retirement. It was very delightful. We also are home to the Office of Accessible Education, formerly called Disability Services. So I do want to say this very clearly. If your student has a 504 or an IEP or any type of personalized learning plan, I urge you, if you have not yet already, to connect with Andrea Rodriguez. And I do ask Dr. Paul, there she is, he put it in the chat, to communicate with her directly. I prefer you not to put disability-related questions in the chat or the Q&A because the session is recorded and I want to maintain your students' confidentiality. But again, they also want to hear from you so that we can get your student connected to their accessibility counselor and registered for services. We have beautiful personal testing rooms. We have different technology solutions to support students who learn in a variety of ways. And it's, again, a point of pride in the diverse population of the students who come to Loyola. In addition, we have an online student success unit who work with students who were in complete online programs prior to COVID, and their in-house expertise has been such a delight. So we really do share and encourage each other. Let me just start with what can you expect for those of you who are physically moving to campus. What you can expect in our center is a rotation of staff, but the majority of our meetings and interactions will be taking place through technology like Zoom. We have a lot of texting software. We have great meetings with students by text. It always surprises me. But we will have a presence on campus, but a limited one because we do need to maintain safe distances and capacities in our space. But again, if folks have questions about that or if students want to hear about getting hired to be a tutor, Nancy Rose is the director there, but feel free to reach out to me after this if you have any questions about our services. And so let me, I think close out too with, making sure that I think it's just very powerful to read students' words. And again, these were students. This particular post had to do with kind of going through an academic struggle. Students sometimes, for all that they share and put out through social media, and sometimes students are very lonely. And I just want to call that out, that they really do need to, you need to create an honest space for how are you doing? Are you telling anyone that you're struggling? I frequently hear students who say things like, well, I didn't want to ask for help. So much so that sometimes I rewrite the language in the Student Success Center to talk to students about how we partner, how we advocate, how we support, because we are a place for all students, not just students who are struggling, we are a place for all students who want to excel. But again, to talk to your students about the ways to feel less lonely, to seek out peers and to seek out connections in safe and healthy ways, I think is really, really important, because when students struggle by themselves, we have mechanisms to find them, but we'd rather find them right away, and that could be a place where you might refer your student to the behavior intervention team that Diana mentioned earlier. But emphasizing that it's a hard adjustment. Some of your students have had the same friends for 12 years. I did going to college, and so that's a big adjustment.
And here's all the offices that we have under Student Affairs. We've got Residential Life. If you have any questions or concerns that are specific to Residential Life, don't hesitate to reach out to anyone in Residential Life. Amy Boyle is the director, and you can find her information on our website. Student Life and Ministry is where students are going to be able to go to find all of those student organizations and also find our faith initiatives. Again, I highly encourage students to take a look at the website. If your child's interested in joining a fraternity or sorority, they'll also be able to find information on Student Life and Ministry's page about that. And then we have our University Counseling Center. And my favorite thing about the University Counseling Center is that it is unlimited and it is free to students. Our students are really, really wonderful. I think you've probably heard Liz and I say that many times, but we really and truly feel that way. And one of the great things about our students is that they're very open about mental health. And there really isn't a stigma on our campus of students going to the counseling center and using it because our students are so open about it. So please encourage your student, whether they are having struggles or not, it's always a good idea to go ahead and establish a relationship with a counselor so that if they do have a time later in the school year where they're not feeling as great, they've already got that relationship established. And again, why not? It's unlimited and it's free. If they ever need to see a counselor outside of Monday through Friday during normal business hours, we do have a 24/7 counseling line. Students could call at any time of the year, at any time of the day, and they can speak to a licensed therapist for as long as they need to for free. Students can just search University Counseling Center or even just counseling from our main homepage, and it'll go right to that website. And it's got the number to make an appointment with an in-person counselor, and it's also got that counseling line. The counseling number is another one that I would encourage you to put in your phone and have your student put in their phone. Again, it's always a number that you kind of want to have if you ever need it. And, if you don't need it, well, no harm if it's in your phone. And then our counseling service, the director of counseling services also oversees our student health. And these two places are actually situated. One is underneath the Orleans room, and that's student health services. And then the counseling center is above the Orleans room. So if your student needs to see a counselor, they would be on the second floor of the Dana Student Center. If they're needing to see a nurse, they're going to be in the basement of the Dana Student Center. We have wonderful nurses and wonderful nurse practitioners. We also have a psychiatrist who comes to campus about every other week. So if your student is needing to meet with them, they can call University Counseling Center and set up an appointment with him. And then we've got a wonderful university sports complex. They've been working very hard to get the complex ready for students to come back. The students will notice that there'll be social distancing markers on the ground, lots of hand sanitizing stations, so that they can still use our wonderful athletic facility. And then last but not least, my office falls within student affairs. And what's not on here is that my office actually oversees our behavioral intervention team, or BIT, which I keep mentioning. And the reason why I keep mentioning this is because it really is probably my favorite thing about Loyola. The beauty of being at a small school is we're able to create these circles of care for students so that we can kind of recreate the familiar structure at home. So I really want to encourage you that if you are concerned that your student is, let's say, homesick, maybe they have the flu, you're maybe worried that they're not making friends or they're feeling a little left out of campus, that you can submit a report and it'll go directly to my office. And then we meet once a week with a number of people from across campus, from folks in academic affairs to counseling, to folks in student life and ministry. And we essentially figure out what is it that the student is struggling with and how can we help them. So for example, if we get a report from you that your student has the flu, what we're probably going to do is we're going to have someone in student health reach out for the health concerns. Probably someone from dining services is going to send up some soup and crackers. And then we'd probably have the resident assistant be checking in regularly as well. So the student gets lots of check-in points and they get that kind of love that they would get at home. Let's say you submit a report that your student's feeling homesick. What we're probably going to do is we're going to ask their lovely crew leader, which is what we call our orientation leaders, to reach out, maybe invite them to coffee, maybe invite them to our student org fair where they can learn about all of our different student organizations, have the resident assistant be checking in, but we're going to find ways to help get them connected to campus so they can hopefully start feeling like this is a second home. So again, want to encourage you to submit a report. It is called Behavior Intervention Team. You can find it on our website either by typing in Behavioral Intervention Team, or you can just type in BIT, B-I-T, that's what we call it for short. It'll take you to the webpage that describes this team, and it also has a reporting form. Do know that if you don't want us to tell your student that you contacted us, just put it in the reporting form and we'll find a subtle way to reach out. If you do want to let us know that you already told them that you submitted this report, even better, makes it easier for us to reach out, but do know that we will do everything we can to preserve privacy. So if you don't want us to tell them that you submitted the report, we'll find a subtle way to reach out. Our main thing is that we want every student to feel really welcome here. We really try to embody and live our Jesuit values, one of which being care for the whole person. And so we want to make sure that we are caring for your whole student and helping them to find a second home here at Loyola. In terms of what our offices will look like, so similar to student success, we will have a limited number of people on a rotating basis on campus, but there will always be a residential life staff member on campus 24/7. We've got a professional staff member known as a community director who lives in each of our residence halls, and they are available any time of day or night if your student should need them. We will also always have a counselor on campus, and someone from student life and ministry will always be on campus during the day. So please encourage your students to reach out to us. Most of our meetings will take place over the phone, but we are here and we are eager and ready to serve your students and you. So don't be strangers. And with that, we've got our contact information right here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually take a look at the question and answers.
So folks, if you have questions that I think we actually handled most of them, but if we have not answered a question, we're happy to hang on for a bit to answer anything in the Q&A.
Yeah, don't hesitate, ask us anything. If we don't know the answer, we can always take your information and get back to you later. See, it says, once the students move into the dorms, can they come out to spend time with parents that stay a couple of days? Yes, our visitation policy is not going to apply to parents. We want to make sure that parents are able to help move their students in and that they can say a proper goodbye. And we also understand that families may come to visit during the school year. So we just ask that you wear a mask and that you practice social distancing from others. But we do welcome you and encourage you to come to campus. What is the hurricane plan? So your student got an email today, I believe, from Amy Boyle, asking them to please fill out or to take our Canvas course that covers COVID-19. At the end of that course, students will be able to fill out both their COVID plan and their hurricane evacuation plan. So we do ask that every student have a hurricane evacuation plan. It is okay if that plan changes. So for example, a lot of times students will say, I'm gonna fly home, because with hurricanes, we do get enough notice that your child could fly home. But then the student moves to campus and they meet this really cool person who lives, maybe 4 hours north. And they decide, well, I'd actually rather evacuate with that person. So they can change their plan, but we would, request that they think through it. If you are thinking that your child would drive somewhere, we kind of want them to have two plans because it's going to depend on where the hurricane goes. So for example, if your plan was that they would drive out to, let's say, they would evacuate towards Atlanta. Well, if the storm turns and heads that way, they may not want to head there. They may want to head out towards someplace like Texas. So sometimes you need a plan A and a plan B, but we do have plenty of notice and we will never leave a student behind. So if you cannot get your child home, we do have a partnership with another college where we can take a limited number of students. Now, granted, they sleep on cots, so it's not necessarily the most comfortable, but we will make sure that they get to a safe place. This campus also has Sodexo dining, so our students' dining plan still works. So they'd have a safe place to sleep. It would be warm, it would be dry, there'd be food. It just may not be as comfortable if they are planning, for example, to go home instead. Let's see. Can students have mace on campus? Excellent question. So we do have a weapons policy that says you can't have anything like a knife, a gun, or a simulated weapon. So in New Orleans, people like their costumes. We do ask that students leave costume weapons home, but we know that we live in a metropolitan city and we want students to stay safe. So Chief Todd and I are okay with mace and pepper spray so long as it is used for the purpose that it is intended for. Now, if a student is just spraying it in the residence hall just to see what happens, they'd have to come see me in conduct. But in general, if a student is using it as it's intended to, they have it in their purse, they put it in their pocket when they go out, we encourage them to do that. Great question. Will the psychiatrist visiting campus be able to refill prescriptions for students? Yes, they can. We just need the student to get an established relationship. Generally, they'll have the student sign a release for whoever they've been working with, and then it's no problem at all. How do I access Laura for parents? I'm going to kick that one over to you, Liz.
Yeah, let me go ahead and make sure I'm not mute. Sorry, I was answering. I'll go ahead and put the link. If you're in Laura, so it's when you go to the Loyola homepage, it's LORA. I'll go ahead and put it in the link. There's a default sign-in that's usually the first two letters of your student's first name and the last four of their social. Again, you don't have to memorize that. That is actually on the instructions. So I'm just posting that as LORA.loyola.edu. It's worth popping in there. You may already have access, but again, it's a good discussion point. And there was an earlier question that I think is worth highlighting that someone asked, do you have to do the FERPA waiver every year? And that's very interesting. I've never had someone ask me that. But No, it usually stands, but your student can change it at any time. So again, it's a place to keep open communication. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, does in fact need to be filed every year. So that's an important and helpful distinction that I wanted to highlight.
Will parents be allowed back in the dorm after move-in day? Again, yes, they will be. We just ask that they wear a mask, practice social distancing with others, not within the people in your own family. But yes, they will be allowed back on campus. Says, is there an option for commuter students? Oh, that question just moved.
Oh, I think
it was
Paul just answered it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Paul just answered it. Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Let's see.
But I think it's an important one to highlight that any student who does want to take their classes virtually can work with their advisor. That may, of course, change what they enroll in, but independent of where you're located, that is still an option.
It says, my student is an incoming freshman in Buddig. Will my student have a roommate and suite mates? It depends. Essentially, if your student has a roommate, they're going to be informed of that, or if they have suite mates, they're going to be informed of that. If they haven't yet, it doesn't mean that they're not getting one. It just means that they may not have been assigned yet. Residential Life is working really hard to get all those assignments out to communicate with students, but we also are having some students change their mind in terms of whether or not they want to live on campus. So it's a bit like a moving puzzle in some ways, but tell them just to keep checking their Loyno email. They'll get updates on that. If they have specific questions, they can always go ahead and reach out to Residential Life, and Residential Life will get back to them. So I would encourage your student to reach out to Amy Boyle or someone on her staff, and they can give a direct answer right away as to whether or not they've got a roommate currently assigned or if they're pending a roommate. But we do have some singles. In fact, a number of students will be able to have singles this year since we've reduced capacity in the residence halls. And then it says, would you request COVID test at least to students staying in the dorms? That's ultimately a personal family decision. You know, we're encouraging, obviously, if a student is experiencing symptoms, student health is going to work with them and get them a test right away. If they're not experiencing any symptoms, though, and they haven't been exposed to anyone with COVID-19 and they've otherwise been practicing social distancing measures, doing other things to kind of self-isolate, we're not requiring it. And then standard microwaves are not allowed in the dorm unless it's rented with the mini fridge. However, they have run out. Do you have more microwaves near the student dorms or residential kitchen? Yes, each residence hall has at least one kitchenette. Most of them have multiple, and they do have stoves, microwaves. They've got pots and pans, a limited number, but some pots and pans for students to use as well. This year we'll have cleaning supplies out, and we're just going to ask that students disinfect everything before they use it and that they clean it after they use it as well. But we will have areas where students can use those. We also have areas for commuter students in Satchmo's lounge. So our commuter students can also have access to a microwave. Do you have rapid testing? Yes, we do. There's several different testing sites around the city. Some of them are rapid, some of them are the one that is a little bit more invasive and takes longer. So students can choose, you know, which type of test they would want essentially. It says, are S's allowed to bring an iron on campus? Our students, sorry. Are students allowed to bring an iron on campus? That is a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I would say, so Amy Boyle, I believe, sent an email out to students about packing lists today and about things that are prohibited in the residence hall. I would ask that the student take a look at that email. If they don't see the answer there, I know it's on Residential Life's website. I know that we've had students bring steamers in the past, but I'm not sure about irons because they may be a fire hazard. So I would say take a look at the website. If you can't find it, email Amy Boyle or someone on her team, and they can get you a definitive answer on that one. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that one off the top of my head, though. Any other questions for us? Well, again, we want to stress that we're really excited to have students come back. We're here to answer questions, call us, email us, but we're really excited to see students, whether it be virtually or in person. So don't be strangers, reach out, reach out.
Yes, I want to say, you know, certainly we are delighted and excited to welcome your students in whichever way they are attending this semester. Loyola is a special place, and I have a lot of optimism that we're going to find really cool ways to create community and to get to know each other. So I cannot wait to meet your students and to welcome them to the Wolfpack. So thank you for joining us. And again, if you think of a burning question later or clarification, certainly we remain available to you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.